Welcome back to Inspired Inc., the CWS podcast, a show where we promote indie comic creators and become inspired by what they create and their journey of creating it. I'm your host, Brandon Bloxdorf, and today on the show we have Anton Blake, creator of Zethada's Space Witch. And we talk about mastering mixed media, the struggles and big rewards of completing any project, and the excitement of IC3. And that's right now we are on the road to IC3, which is taking place Sunday, March 15th. You can get your tickets by clicking in the link in our description. And creators, to get your books on time and stress-free, try to place your orders by February 1st. We have many shipping options available as the convention gets closer, but you can start planning now. And well, let's talk to Anton about some cool stuff. What got you into mixed media stuff? Like, your mixed media stuff is what always stands out to me, and that's what really what really captivated me, and especially like being able to draw with you one night and seeing what you were doing, your mindset, like the materials you play with, like you do so much. And when it comes to art, a lot of us think about like, oh, I got to figure out how to put this, pen and pencil to paper and create an image, but you're literally creating like a thing. how do you blend that together with your art? Because I mean, you're doing stuff that like, you would read old Jack Kirby comics and be like, oh, whoa, look at this crazy like 3D stuff. This was obviously like a photo he took and then like, utilized it in a book, but like you make that stuff essentially. Like where did that interest come from? Where does the mindset start? Like, how do you pop things out of the page like
that? It's kind of a lot of disparate things, very roundabout way that I eventually came to it. Like, I mean, I was raised very much on comics. Like, my parents started buying me them before I could read. So like, it's deeply ingrained in me. So like, I, of course, for like most of us, focused on just pen and ink for a very long time. But I would also always just be grabbed by weirder pieces of art that like my parents would take me to like art museums often, and both of them would do lots of creative things, like play music and do art and all that kind of stuff. So I've always just been immersed in all sorts of different art and creative outlets, but it was probably me like finding artists like Bill Sienkiewicz or like Dave McKean, all those sorts of guys that did mixed media in comics, and slowly over time, like realizing I wanted to do things like that, and wasn't confident for a long time because outside of like high school art classes, I had no training whatsoever. I'm pretty much all self-taught outside of those high school classes, and so it was a lot of just like slowly experimenting in sketchbooks and stuff until I felt like, okay, maybe I can try it in like an actual publishable page or something. But it's a lot of just trial and error, messing around, seeing what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And I think probably the biggest thing, like outside of any influences, direct or indirect, is just that I would find myself getting bored doing the same type of art all the time, like the same just pen and ink, or even like feel the need to change my style within that at times. Cause if I stick to one thing for too long, I start hating it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Even if it is good or not, it just doesn't feel right. So eventually coming to mixed media, it was like, oh, this is how I keep everything fresh and interesting for me. And it has made it so much easier for me to create. It makes me way faster because I'm not like as easily getting stuck in that like mental trap of, oh, I'm bored with this. So I need to put it down or something. So like when I'm working on a page, I might be using like upwards of like 10 different mediums and things. And half the time it's just on a whim of like whatever feels right in that moment. Only sometimes do I like write down ahead of time, like on my like thumbnails or scripts or something, that like, oh, this needs to be gouache or this needs to be collage or whatever, So it's using my own peculiarities to like get out of my own way, I guess.
Do you feel like that might even like, do you feel like you want to do something, but it might interrupt the flow of a story? How do you keep it within the flow of a book at that point? Because you do that so much in your first issue. Like you kind of bounce between these different elements, and it feels so purposeful and planned. And like I don't see how it messes anything up. But do you feel like you've been like you've done something? You're like, no, this just does not work here. It's interrupting what needs to actually happen, and you have to restrain yourself sometimes.
Occasionally, it's been very rare thus far, at least. Like I feel like it it takes long enough for me to do a lot of these things that like I'm constantly like thinking about the next step while I'm working on something. So it um, from my years of experimenting with stuff before like fully implementing it, I've gotten to that comfortable place where I can just intuit like, oh, this is gonna go well or not. But then there every now and then it does crop up where like I miscalculated or something. Like um, I had that for the first page of the second issue of my comic, Zethia Space Witch, over the summer. It was like the first thing that I did for that issue, and it was pushing it in the art in like a very different way. And as I kept going on with like more and more pages of it, I kept realizing like, oh, this page doesn't fit stylistically whatsoever, even though it already is like kind of jumping around with all these mixed media, and it just tonally was off,
Hmm.
I guess. So I messed with it a bunch, like digitally, see like what can I like if there are effects that I can do to make it fit more. And ultimately, I just decided like I need to do a different page. And thankfully, it was a splash page, so it was I could. There weren't a lot of important like visual story beats that I
Hmm.
needed to really completely like rework or something. It was more of a mood setter of a page, and so I redid that page kind of fast, like close to the end of production on that issue, and now I just have this extra piece sitting that maybe a future comic it will fit with. So
I
we'll
mean,
see.
so many lessons there. One, complete your project first. Finish telling your story, and then go back. Step one, finish it, because you'll see a lot at that point. And it sounds like you finished the issue, and then got near completion to it, and you're like, you know what, this is not going to work anymore for what the story has now evolved into. And then you have to go back, revisions. Key point: always go back and revise your work and find out what's working or
Mhm.
not. And then you have to start deciding, like, quite literally, like, it's funny we brought this up, but like, got to kill your babies sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to
Mhm.
kill your babies. And doesn't matter how precious they are, how much you loved it when you started upon that journey, but you realize like this isn't working, like I can utilize this hopefully in the future. But if not, do you feel like you got like it was still worth it? Like you learned something, you practiced something,
Mhm.
you got a piece of art complete in that sense. So either way, no matter what the overall effect was, overall like outcome was, you still won something out of it. And it seems to, do you feel like your new page grew your issue in the direction you wanted it to be?
Very much so. Yeah, it feels way more cohesive with the rest of it, and I mean that's kind of the uh, both like pro and con in like different ways of doing something more experimental, like art style wise, is that you can push it too far to the point where something doesn't fit and have to reel it in. But then at the same time, like you find the kind of box that you need to work within to make
Mhm.
it the thing that you're trying to actually create.
Yeah, because when you think about like, I'm a big Sandman fan. So Dave
Mm-hmm.
McKean's art. In fact, I was just looking at Black Orchid the other night, and I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
man, this is so radically different from like what you see from Dave in general, like especially his later work. But when you look at books like Mr. Punch, and
Mm-hmm.
any Sandman book, any Sandman cover, they're all so exquisite, and they're so calculated and fun and interesting, and there's little pieces in there you would have never caught unless you continuously go back and analyze it. But it fits the theme and the tone of whatever he's working on, whether it be, you know, that
Hmm.
short Mr. Punch story or Sandman and things like that. Dave knows how to like isolate it enough to fit the project, and I think that's the thing where experimental sorry, it's snowing and it got really crazy out of nowhere. Dave's really good at, you know, any experimental artist is very, you should be very good at knowing when to cap it and what's appropriate for that project. Is that something you're consistently learning, or is that like an in the moment thing, or you're just like, or is it like what you just described? You did it, you found out it didn't work, and now you're just going to save that for later and try to reutilize it. Like, how do you understand if you're going and pushing yourself too far in a project?
I think given, like specifically for comics, since it is a storytelling medium, the thing that I try to like focus on most with that is, will this, serve the story and make it, you know, readable for an audience? Like I, for a long time, have been very big on um, conveying like how everything is flowing and making sure it's understandable, at least what needs to be understandable, like the crucial bits of the story are very much there. And it's, it doesn't really matter what else you do in the same capacity, like as long as the point that you're trying to make gets across to the majority of readers, then you can really kind of go anywhere in that regard. Like I will often be like thinking about, how does this panel flow to this panel? I am a big stickler on like knowing if this page I'm working on is going to be the page before the page flip,
Mm-hmm.
then that last panel has to have like even if it's like the tiniest little cliffhangery thing that like entices somebody to turn the page and continue reading. Like I'm always considering that. So everything else after that is kind of secondary
Oh.
in whatever I'm really like considering. And I love to kind of play with like how much can I get away with while also still trying to ground myself in like, if this is somebody's like first comic, or like they're new to comics in whatever way, like are they still going to figure out where to go?
Yep.
So as long as you, I think, frame your thinking within that, then you can let yourself go in all sorts of places that you maybe wouldn't have expected.
And that all started from your first statement. Like, you're trying to find clarity within the
Mhm.
story. No matter what, it always comes down into how the story's being, you know, portrayed, how readable it is. How can somebody follow this? Wow, I kind of do all these experimental things. And that's so much fun. I'm sure that keeps, I mean, just the creation process so open and interesting, because do you feel like you're constantly experimenting and trying new things with every issue?
Definitely. I especially with like my comic Zethia, I have been, learning more mediums as I go on. And I mean, the first issue is kind of a lesson of like, you can see me figuring out some of the mediums as I go along.
That makes sense.
And so I always, I need that like new art, like, excitement. So I'm always trying to like find something else that I can bring to all of this. Like I'm just creatively never happy staying at a certain place. I need to like keep pushing. Um, and I think it's definitely something that's visible in my work ever since I've switched to doing mixed media, is that you see me getting more used to X medium and becoming more confident in the use of it and like doing new interesting things with it. So Yeah, I think it's for anybody who wants to like dive into that kind of nitty gritty, like I do when I'm reading something for the umpteenth time, to decipher, what little hints I can find on creation of comics, then it's in there with my work for sure.
That's awesome. I mean, and that's just something you keep yourself growing. And that's another thing
Mhm.
is that you're constantly growing as an artist. And then you start to really strip away, I guess, your walls of limitations at that point. You kind of realize there's always a way out of a scenario in the sense of creating.
Mhm.
We've written ourselves into holes before, we've drawn ourselves into a corner before. And here you're kind of like finding a way to like expand that and be like, it's like a magic act. You kind of always get to,
Mhm.
utilize some sort of trick to like manipulate the page or like the story or take things a different direction. Is
Yeah.
that why your character, like, Space Switch, you know what I mean? Like, is that why you have such a character based on that? Because I mean, immediately it's Space Switch, like as the subtitle of your book. Is that like what gives you that freedom? Is that kind of why this character kind of came to life, or where did this character come from in that sense?
Um, I haven't thought about it in that sense, actually, but it sort of, yeah. I loved what you said about the sort of like the magic trick of it. Like prior to doing comics, I worked in film for about 8 years. Went to film school and everything, and so I would often like compare a lot of like the jobs within um, film as you're trying to pull off a magic trick. Like I was a camera operator and assistant camera for a long time, which meant I was often like if you're first AC, you're typically the one in charge of making sure everything is in focus. And if you have like quick changes in like who's in focus and who's not, then you need to have trained a lot to make it seamless. And so, like a lot of those sorts of jobs, it's like if the audience never noticed you were there, then you succeeded, sort of thing. And so I definitely apply that a lot to my storytelling here, and I use lots of aspects of my time in film in that regard, like with the sort of limitations thing. Like a one of the most creative things, or like creatively enriching things you can do in film is have a low budget that like doesn't allow you to do every big thing that you would initially think, because forces you to think about it in a different way, and like how can we achieve this and still be good and interesting, without $100 million budget, whatever. So I'm thinking often about that too, but for Zethia, the concept of that just kind of randomly came to me a few years ago. Like I basically had that title, Zethia Space Witch, and just the initial premise of she's a witch, she's in space, she's going on weird adventures. And it sat for a long time, just kind of percolating, boiling in the back of my mind until it finally like boiled over in and had to come out this past year. And I've always been a big fan of like genre stuff, like sci-fi, fantasy, horror, all of that kind of stuff. But I've even more than that been really into when those genres get melded. Like I'm a huge fan of what's referred to as weird fiction, which is like from the old pulp
Hmm.
magazines that Conan the Barbarian originally came from, and Fatford and the Grey Mouser, all of these things that were around before those genres got more like clearly defined
Hmm.
as, oh, only these things happen in sci-fi, only these things happen in fantasy, because they would mix and meld a lot. Like there's references in a lot of those Conan the Barbarian stories to creatures from Lovecraft, because they were
Yeah.
really good friends, and like that's a strange mix of genres already. So I love that kind of thing, the melding of these things that we now are like have kind of defined to death in some ways, and like how can we approach them in different ways by combining them. And So that it definitely is very similar in my mind to, I guess, like my approach with the art side of it, and not as well as the story. So I just want always, I guess like the big takeaway from all of this is I just always want to experiment and like do something different, because like originality is a whole, made up
Yeah.
thing. Like everything's based on something else, but the way that you create something that feels original is by grabbing the little things that you as an individual find most interesting, and that will create a whole new soup that hasn't been made before.
I mean, that's where we get some of the greatest, just things in Star Wars. Dude, Star Wars is not science fiction at all. There's nothing sciency about Star Wars, not a single thing. It's a space western, like it is
Mhm.
100% this well, that, and that's how you find, you get these ingredients. They're all big ingredients. And if someone like you who probably cooks often, I assume because you are also vegan, right? And so like I'm always cooking, like, when you think about making seitan and stuff like that, and this is going to turn this into a vegan talk, I'm sorry everybody, but like when you go in that direction, like, and you cook tofu and stuff like that, you're messing with a bland ingredient. Genres are
Mhm.
bland ingredients, and by adding seasoning and spicings and stuff like that, you can make something beautiful and unique, and not just be stuck with like a square block of tofu, or a space story, or just a western. You add these ingredients and you add these flavors and layerings, and all of a sudden you're just like, out of this tofu dish, I'm now making Mexican dishes, I'm now making Italian dishes, and I'm now making, all sorts of stuff. And you're like, oh, I got this by combining things. And people, I think a lot of people get stuck being like, oh, I want to write a sci-fi story. How do I do that? And then they just look at Dune for a sci-fi
Mhm.
story. And Dune is a wonderful sci-fi story. There's nothing bashing about that. But it's just like there's so much more to pull apart than just a science fiction aspect of it. And I think you do a
Mhm.
really good job at that. Just blending
I think.
stuff. You got to blend stuff like crazy, and
Mhm.
you'll get the greatest outcomes. I mean, I talk about it all the time. Teenage Babylon, cosmic punk rock love story, just short,
Mhm.
sweet, definitive, and that's the pitch. That's the line, and it's combining elements that other people haven't really combined like that before. And you
Mhm.
do that, and now you have a dish. It's one of those things. You now have a
Yeah.
comic, a story.
I mean, even you're mentioning Dune. Like, the more you look at that, it's not even just straight up what we at this day and age would call sci-fi. Like, there's a lot of hints of what would be more traditionally considered fantasy, and like because there's all this like mythology and
Yeah.
like references to lots of different religions and everything. So it's like the more you look into a lot of like great stories, the more you'll notice that that this pushes the boundaries that we've set for
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
already.
It's more than it appears. It's more than just a sci-fi. It's a political story. It's talking
Mm-hmm.
about environments and ecosystems. It's more than just a block of tofu is where we're going with. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? But dude, that's so cool. And I know, like, it sounds like you've been influenced by your parents a whole lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Them being creators, musicians. Is that what's giving you so much freedom and creativity to like go this route? I mean, you working in film and camera operator into comics. I mean, I hear that a lot from creators. I mean, I even dabbled in film stuff before I went into comics, because you realize how much easier it is too, in comparison to film. But like, one, what got you to embrace what your parents were offering, and how did you find your way into like finding these mediums to explore through?
I mean, it wasn't hard to, let those influences from my parents in, just because I was immersed in all of that. Like, my parents were in the like original Austin punk scene in like
Cool.
70s and 80s.
Sick.
My dad was involved in the like New Mexico like punk metal grunge scene in
It's rad.
80s and early 90s, all that. And so
I love your
we
parents already. I see why you're
yeah.
influenced.
So it was just like always around me, and certainly like helped to like garner that in like infant into toddler into like very young kid age of like this is just something that you do almost.
Oh,
Like it was very normalized in that way. So it was easy for me to just spend all day drawing as a kid, or eventually, in middle school, pick up bass and teach myself how to play.
forget we're both bass
And
players too.
mhm.
I love you more and more every time we talk. Like,
um, so with anybody, of course, there is some pushback of like, oh, I want to differentiate myself from my parents, and you find your niche. Like neither of them were really into comics necessarily. Like they liked comic strips or whatever, but they weren't. They were never like devout comic book readers like me. But they still, for whatever reason, decided to just start buying me comics at a very early age, and so yeah, it's an interesting mix of like it just right away was always present, and making things was just what you kind of do.
hmm
And they definitely fostered a lot of that. Like they definitely encouraged me to draw plenty, and like I had to go to college. Like them and my grandparents were very insistent. I didn't really care one way or another about college, but they at least told me like, you have to get a degree, but it can be in whatever you want. Like
oh yeah.
you just have to do it. So, and yeah, I almost went for illustration, but kind of last second decided to go elsewhere for a myriad of other reasons, and found my way back, thankfully. But yeah, so it was. It's an interesting mix, I guess. There's a lot to dive in. I feel like I'll be talking to my therapist about that.
That's so did some I don't know, and make I had a similar thing. So I went to school, and I went to school for writing, because I was
Mhm,
like I was a musician that at that time, and I was really focused on that, but I realized like, I don't know how I'm never going to make it as a musician, so I don't think
mhm,
this is the right thing. If I do writing, at least that opens up journalism, that opens up
mhm,
teaching, that opens up X, Y, and Z. So I went to that, and of course my first year in college, I was 18, 19. I got straight D's, and then I'm in academic suspension. And then I go back to college, and I'm going for music because my band's doing
mhm,
good, and all this stuff, and I'm trying to progress as a bassist. And so I'm almost finished with my music degree, and I pivot. I just switch back to writing in English because I was kind of like in a way traumatized by my musical experience, and that like
mhm,
trauma, even now I'm working through it. Speaking of therapists, and it's one of those things where like I put so much of a pedestal on myself for my musicality and my skill set and my playing, that like it's hard for me to reapproach music again. And it's
mhm,
why I went into writing, and why I'm drawing so much now too. But like I kind of like freaked myself out of music, and it's hard. I'm trying to find that love again, which you'll see me doing a random
mhm.
song or something on Instagram live just for fun or whatever. But like it's hard for me to go back to it. Is that kind of what happened to you, by like what you're implying? And I don't want to open up gates if you don't want to,
Yeah,
but
no,
like,
happy to go there. Yeah, I definitely got to this weird place that I think plenty of people do when it was time for me to start applying to colleges, that like I started just feeling the imposter syndrome real big, like
yeah.
thinking like, oh, my art's not there yet or something. And um, maybe this isn't a moneymaker
Yeah.
sort of career, because my dad has struggled with making an art career like all my childhood, and so that was something that they always like talked about with me. But um, so I let that get to me, and I decided, well, I could do like comics and art on the side or whatever, and ended up in film. And it wasn't until much later that I started thinking like, well, no, this is, I still feel that itch. Like I
Mhm.
need to do this. And given the just like what energy I have left in the day after going to work. I don't, it's going to take me forever to even like do any of this. Cause I just, I can't sit down at the desk for a bunch of hours late at night and then get up and do the other work. So I got to a point in film where I just burned myself out real bad. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and it's very seasonal
Yeah.
work up there. Like very few productions want to film during the winter, and but then everyone is there for like May 1st till September. So you're just like taking every gig that you can, and it's a hard work-life balance to navigate,
Yeah.
especially when you're still kind of establishing yourself within that and finding, consistent clients as a freelance person. So it shifted over to like, well, maybe it is art again. Maybe I do need to focus more time and energy into that. And it's been a slow road up till this past year and a half or so of being like, no, I need to dedicate way more of my time and energy into this. And it's that, as with anything, has its own challenges. Sometimes it's hard. Even a dream job is a job.
Yeah.
um,
Vibes.
but it's I'm definitely having way more fun than in almost anything I've done up to now. So
Oh, it's
it's
awesome.
worth it.
Yeah, dude, it's honestly like finding the baseline for your passion and your love and your happiness. I think that happens when you get older too, in a sense,
Hmm.
like I don't regret any of my music years. Like I think it's all benefited me. And like honestly, like a lot of my stories are music based. And so I'm pulling
Hmm.
from so many moments and memories and like events and things I learned from being a musician into my art. And do you feel like that's the same thing with you and your filmmaking, especially camera operating into being an illustrator? Like you have an eye
Hmm.
for like a shot and like perspective. Do you think that all has helped you and helped elevate yourself a bit as a creator?
Very much, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much that you can translate between mediums because they're, both of them are visual.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, knowing composition and like the rule of thirds, all that kind of stuff, and um, that can help you a lot as in it either field. But I feel like I try to take something from any sort of creative thing I do and like apply it, or like it's kind of how my brain works. Of like, oh, how can I take this and twist it to this need now? Like I since tail end of 2019 have been playing lots of like role playing games like D&D or Mothership, all those sorts of things,
Yeah.
and um, there's creative things from that you can take from other for other outlets.
D&D is like one of the best things a creator can do. I've come
Mhm.
to find out.
Yeah, there have been a few times where like I get stuck on a story of like I don't know where to go from here. Like if everything I'm coming up with feels like too contrived, and I think like, oh, maybe introduce a little randomness. And this is actually inspired by a friend, also cartoonist Jerome Cabanatan, asking a bunch of us like that play D&D and also make comics about like, hey, do you ever use stuff from that in making? And I will occasionally just like write down a few options of like things that could like I think could happen, and I'll just roll a die,
Oh,
and
wow.
whatever it lands on, like okay, now I gotta like this is the path I need to take, and I can explore it from there. And it's done me pretty well so far
Oh, dude,
with
that's great.
those rare times I need to do that.
Yeah, because I mean, all of us, I mean, writer's block is defined by many ways. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I don't necessarily know if writer's block is a thing. It's like a mindset, that you kind of position yourself in. But
Hmm.
there is a time when you're writing when you're just like, I don't know what the best option is because they're all pretty freaking cool. Like this can go in any of these ways and it can all
Hmm.
work. But like, what? and I can't decide. You, especially as a single creator, sometimes you're just like, I don't even know where I should really proceed to really elevate the story. And that's a fun way to get yourself out of it, because then you're like, it's
Yeah.
even to fate at this point, like.
Yeah, because something that works in that regard, like it, and kind of how I've started figuring out how to utilize something like that from D&D is because there's as especially as a dungeon master, like the referee, whatever like game, they all
Yeah.
call it something different. Um, you're having to do a lot of improvising of things that the players are being faced with, and you have to be able to react to what things they're doing that you would never in a million years guess, and that's like part of the joy of it.
Yeah.
So finding how to kind of like flex that muscle, get comfortable with that, and then utilize that within your story that you don't have to think up on the fly. You have more time to like really like flesh that out. It can be really useful because it gets you out of that sort of analysis paralysis. Like it just forces you in a direction, and you have to live with those consequences. And often it's a really fun final solution for it. So
Dude, yeah, improv in general. I think I was talking to a creator that was also an actor, and the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Tony Wolf. But like, if it was another creator, it could have been someone else. But we were talking about improv, and improv is one of those things as like a writer and as a creator, like I've always encouraged people to try out, like especially if you do have that film aspiration in that sense too, because improving with people, it gives you that like, how do I react in the spur of the moment? How do I continue this thing going, and how do I just like play it out to the end until we get to the end? And sometimes that's what you've got to do. And D&D is like a great, not alternative, but like, option for improv, getting a group together and being comfortable with them, if that's better than going into like, your local place that does improv or whatever classes or anything. Like, just get some friends together, do that. That's all improv. And you guys play that to the end. You have now completed a story. You know what I mean? And that's another big thing. You get to see how things start and how they could go to the end. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things creators struggle with no matter what. I'm at fault for that. Or at least I'm guilt tripping myself at the fault for that, because I have series open right now. But improv is one of those things that just gets your brain working in ways you would have never predicted, responses you would have never predicted, or and situations. And then, like you said, pull that situation, throw your character in that or something similar, and you'll really see the magic of what happens at that point.
Yeah, there's a group here in Austin that puts on the like local zine fest called Austin Zine Friends. We meet up every month and to make work on zines and comics and stuff. And there's a section of it that's dedicated to a comics jam where everybody has just a piece of paper, 3 panels, or sometimes we do like classic like mini comic with the 8 folds from a 8.5 by 11 sheet, and you get a random word generator. That's your prompt. Everybody draws one panel, and you have 2 minutes for it. And then when it's done, you pass it over to the next person, and they have 2 minutes to continue the story, and until you finish, have all 3 panels or all 8, whatever. And it always is like the goofiest time. Like we're all dying laughing by the end of it. And that's another like good way to utilize that sort of improv mentality, specifically within comics. And it can be a really good exercise in like, if you're not used to that improv sort of side of things, then like that could be a really good way to start it. And if you don't want to get into D&D or something too, it's like, just get a couple of your friends together, do that on, a Saturday morning, whatever, and it'll get those gears moving. So it's incredible. It can be exhausting because you have 2 minutes and your brain is having to work real fast. You'll be exhausted by the end the first few times, but it's incredibly fun.
And I mean, I think that's one of the things that, we all have to work through sometimes is like, creating is exhausting. Any sort of types. Like when I'm writing a comic or if I'm drawing something like on Spilled Ink, I always have snacks next to me because I'm
Hmm.
always going to you see why like the writers from the 90s like are all overweight because they're just like, dude, it is, when you're writing all day, like your brain is thinking so much. Like, Brian
Hmm.
Michael Bendis lost like 80 pounds or something. And you could see why he was doing that whole Ultimate Universe. And you're like, dude, with that much writing, yeah, I see. Like, you're just stuck and you're hungry all the time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's crazy what that does to your body, but it's kind of like working out too. Like, you're just conditioning
Hmm.
yourself. You're conditioning your
Hmm.
brain. You're conditioning your body for it. You know how to sit longer. You know how to focus longer. You know how to like come up with things on the spot faster. It's all just practice. So, going back to like, writer's block or even sometimes losing inspiration, not knowing where to go to with a story, that all comes and it fixes itself through time and practice. And it's just enduring those times over and over and over again of like, how do I put more pressure on myself to crack a little bit to make sure this gets done? And for some reason, like it does work for creators. And I'm not saying stress yourself out to where, you're just like sleepless and like bearded and just messy, but like putting like a regular workout routine, doing a
Hmm.
regular creative routine like that. It'll keep your ideas fresher and probably your stories will take better twists and turns than if you hadn't, to be honest.
Hmm.
Um, oh, go on.
No, yeah, it that was, I think that side of things is probably what I struggled with the longest, and why I didn't finish a comic up until the last 5 years, or 6 years, whatever it is at this point. Um, like all through my 20s, I would like start a comic and like have it scripted out, but like lose steam maybe halfway
Oh,
or
wow.
something, because I just didn't have those repetitions of like, this is how long you got to do it. You got to make sure you're putting in those hours and getting used to, you know, sitting at the drafting table for X amount of hours this day, and like, go take a break so that you can put in more time, and like all of that sort of, the physicality and mental space that you need to be in to be able to do that consistently. I just did not have that, and you absolutely have to kind of train yourself. It is in a way a workout regimen of like, you got to build up to that point.
I mean, Spilled Ink is the perfect example of that. 2 hours a week, we are at the drawing board no matter what. And we've done 31 episodes so far, and it's one of those things where I see Max getting faster. Max is extraordinary no matter what. That kid is just
Mm-hmm.
insane.
Truly.
But like, he's like completing pieces in 2 hours from start to finish. And I used to go in with like pencils ready or just stuff like that. And lately, I've even just been doing pencils on the stream, but like that discipline of like, okay, I'm gonna get as much of this done or try to get true to completion in 2 hours of whatever this piece is, and doing that every single week. Like I've seen my speed improve. This past week I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even that happy with like my Superman drawing, but then going back over it like on a day off with inks, I was like, this actually is not bad for the time constraints I've given
Mm-hmm.
myself to do these pencils. I think another part of that too is like kind of being forgiving with yourself. I know all of
Mm-hmm.
us could be very, very harsh with what we think of our work, what we think of like how the outcome is coming. I'm sure even with mixed media, you're debating
Mm-hmm.
with yourself all the time on that. Is this appropriate or not? Do you struggle with that a little bit of being like keeping it up to par with like your illustrations and everything?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I doubt that will ever like fully go away for, most people.
Yeah.
I have gotten to a point where I uh, am able to kind of just reassure myself of like, this is maybe not uh, like 100% what I wanted, but it's close, and I can maybe, if I need to, I can rework it a little bit, fix it up, but uh, very much live by that like mantra of finish not perfect.
Hmm.
Like I could,
Dude,
flip
yeah.
through any of my published work thus far and say like, oh, this is, perspective's a little off on this, that hand is a little wonky, whatever. But I am also at the point where I can look at that and not like cringe or something, and just be like, okay, I accept it. That's what it is.
The biggest component, dude. Hands down.
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah. It took a long, long time of, really working on those inner demons,
Yeah.
and so if you can just repeat to yourself that like finish not perfect mindset, then eventually you might start believing it.
Yeah, no, dude, 100%. Super big example. Like I was trying to wrap up all my drawings for 2024, and I had this like Thor pencil that I started
Mhm.
back in August, and then like stuff got crazy, and then like life stuff happened, and I never got to finishing this piece. And then I started working at it like on my break during the new year, and I was like, I don't like these pencils. These are so stiff. Like I could tell my work has
Mhm.
evolved from like August to now in that sense. But then I was re-ink, going not re-inking it. I was inking it in general, just like I'm gonna finish this piece like today because it's the end of the new year or end of the year. And I wrapped it up and I was like, I'm insanely happy with this because I got to try different things and I had different textures and I went to completion. But like even that Superman drawing I was just talking about, I was like, I started inking it and I was like, I don't like this. I was like halfway done inking. I was like, I still don't like this. And then I finished inking and I was like, this actually isn't bad. Like I
Mhm.
dig this. I'm glad I finished it. Just finishing your piece, finishing your story, you'll never know what it like turns out to be if you don't do that because it's very easy to give up at 20%, 60%,
Mhm.
75%. You know what I mean? You could still stop yourself from finishing something super cool by putting that doubt in your mind. But if you just complete it, because no matter what, if you complete it, you're still learning something and you're finishing a piece. More completed pieces matter more than attempts, I feel.
100%. Yeah. So the first comic that I decided to like, I'm going all in on mixed media, were my 5 pages in the Ghost Agents Metropolis book, written by Rocco Jerome,
Yeah.
also published by Cosmic Lion, similar to Zethia. And I had said, like, initially, like, to Rocco in this discussions about working on it, they're like, hey, I want to push myself. I want to really go like wild with mixed media. And he wrote something for me that let me do that. Basically, like the script itself was like left lots of room for me to make a lot of decisions on pacing and style and everything. And it was intimidating for sure in a lot of places because I was doing lots of things that I had never done before, and this is a paid gig essentially. And but I just kept telling myself like, trust the process, trust the process. Like I've heard so many people prior talk about like when you feel like it is looking the worst, you're probably like around like 75 to 80% there,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
just push through that last little hump, and then you're golden. You've done it. It's going to look much better. It's a really weird part of the process and
Yeah.
is a very human thing. Like almost everybody
I've
has
heard Neil
that.
Gaiman say
So
that same advice, dude.
mhm,
He's like, when I'm talking to my editor and I'm about 75, 80% done with my book, I'm always ready to throw it out the window. And it's my editor that stops me every time.
mhm,
And it's not till I complete it that I realize, like, oh, I'm glad I never gave this up. Like, that seems to be the pinnacle point. And I completely understand what you mean there with my
mhm.
recent drawings, too.
Yeah, yeah. It's, somebody has got to do a study on this because it's clearly
Yeah, that's the
a
thing.
very human thing we all deal with. But yeah, you just got to give yourself those reassurances like, hey, if I complete it, it's going to be okay. It's going to be better than I think it is. And um, it will be done.
Mhm.
And now I can move on to the next thing and apply what I learned
Yes.
to make it better. So yeah, I see that all the time. Like I was talking about looking at old stuff and seeing the mistakes is like I've become okay with being able to see it because now I can look at it with the mindset of I know how to do this thing better now because I got that out already. Like I've already done that and noticed that mistake.
Hmm.
So it's just kind of, you just push yourself forward, keep going.
Yeah, just finish it. I mean, finishing it is the biggest component. And I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, almost all of my building drawings, like I wanted to stop doing. Like I've
Hmm.
like even midstream, I'm like I should just toss this out and restart. But like you don't do that. Just finish it because like what you said, just apply everything you learned and do it again, and it'll be way better. It'll be
Hmm.
way cooler. I drew like I hate that I can't draw Batman. Like it's like one of the characters. Like I want to get good at drawing Batman, Spawn, and Spider Man. Like those are the only three I really
Hmm.
care about. That I'm like if I could draw those three, I'd be super hyped. If I could spit that down, I'd be satisfied with my art career. And like even like I drew a Batman 3 months ago and I hated it. I hated every aspect of it. And I started doing one this weekend just for fun. And like I wanted to give up because I'm like, this is still turning out like how I don't like it. And then I hit a point and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I erased that line and made it just a little thinner. And it changed everything. And all of a sudden, like it's like the coolest Batman thing I've ever done. But if I would have stopped an hour before, I would have never seen that realization. I would have never thought
Hmm.
to like try that trick. And now I know to try that trick on like other things in the future. Dude, the Hellboy drawing we did together on Spilled Ink, I hated. I despised my Hellboy drawing, and then I
Hmm.
colored it, and I was like, "Oh, this is rad! Like this totally works!" Like, and I really do appreciate it now. It shows what completing things can do for you. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking similarly. The Hellboy piece I did
Oh,
for that episode,
Rachel's
like
killer, dude.
I had said on the outset, like beginning of that episode, like, hey, I've kind of selected these
Yeah.
mediums to use, but I'm going completely just like flying off the seat of my pants. Like I
Hmm.
don't know how this is gonna go. Maybe it'll all screwed up, and that'll be its own lesson, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
And it there were definitely points in it where I was like, I have no idea where I'm going with
Mm.
this, what to do to like get it back on track with what I had in mind, but just have to just keep going. And I think had I been doing like that live by myself, it would have been a lot more anxiety inducing. But like being able to know like, oh, Brandon and Max, they'll vamp for a while, talk about stuff, and that I have time now to like sit
Hmm.
and be like, what the hell am I doing? and
That's exactly. Yeah.
but it got there, and you know, it's I think when I look at that piece, I definitely uh, think about those aspects of like, oh yeah, I like drew myself into a corner and had to claw my way back from it, and I think it was a fun, experiment.
Yeah, yeah, dude, yours came out killer. Like, if
Thank you.
we get a picture up, we should splash it up here if we something,
Mhm.
or share it when we share the episode. It's such a fun piece. It was such a fun night, and for those who are watching this as the episode releases, we're actually going to have Anton back on Spilled Ink with a bunch of the Cosmic Lion people. So make sure to look for that upcoming episode, since all of these segments are part of the road to IC3,
Mhm.
which is super exciting. Which is really like one of the pinnacle reasons I brought you on the show today. I just love talking to you in general too, but dude, I'm Indie Creator Con. I'm super hyped
Mhm.
that you're going to be there. I'm super hyped that we're going to hang out. You're part of the
Yeah, me
Cosmic
too.
Lion Cosmic Lion Island. And
Mhm.
there's so many great people. Rose going to be there. Rick Lopez, Eli, Tony Wolf. So many cool people are going to be part of
Mhm.
that. How did you get involved with Cosmic Lion? And what are you looking forward to with IC3 this year?
I got hooked up with that crew from Image Grand Design.
Oh, cool.
Uh,
Yeah.
I was one of, if not the last person that got added to the grand design side of the book, because there's a Image Grand Disaster as well.
Hmm.
Um, and because I had been part of the like Facebook group CKRS with some of those guys, but was never very active because I'm just not big on Facebook.
Vibes.
And I saw them starting to like organize this thing right as lockdown was beginning, and I thought, yeah, I want to be a part of that. Like that sounds fun, and so I did a little segment with Shadowhawk and Trencher, like Keith Giffen, and just like found my little niche within there, and we would be part of the like what they coined eventually the digital bullpen of everybody working on their pages late at night over Zoom and just
Ooh.
hanging out. And Eli, founder, president, all of the titles
Yeah.
for Cosmic Lion, is the one who put it out. So I met all of those guys from that, and have had just slowly but surely done more stuff with them, like the Ghost Agents pages with Rocco, and eventually, roughly this time last year, hit up Eli, being like, "Hey, I've got a solo book I want to do, I want to pitch to you." And he had said, like, "Yeah, I've been wanting to work with you more directly for a while now, outside of just those two or three little things." So it was really nice. And I mean, yeah, we're all friends with each other. We're all pals. A bunch of us uh, had a big Airbnb house at Heroes Con last year that, like, Rick Lopez and I were sleeping on the couches, like making it all work. It was very very much felt like my old, like, early 20s punk
Yeah.
tour van days. And I hadn't met any of them in person, even though we've been very good friends for 4 years by that point, and until IC3 last year. And I kind of went up on a whim. I wasn't tabling. I knew that I wasn't going to have enough stuff to, fill out a table that time, but I knew that I had a flexible enough schedule that month that yeah, let's just go. Like 90% of these friends I have are going to be there,
Yeah.
and I've still never met any of them in person. So I went up, and, like, funny enough, Ro Higashi is also in the Austin area, like me, and we hadn't met in person until we were in Connecticut.
Oh my gosh, that's rad.
And, like, since then we've, like, hung out
Yeah.
and seen each other in
Ro's
town. But
amazing too.
yes.
Everyone should check out her episode on Spilled Ink and her
Hmm.
spotlights and her live drawings. And she's going to be on that Spilled Ink episode with us coming up. Like,
Hmm.
I love that girl. She's astonishing.
Yeah, she's awesome. Her book, Half of the Crown, is
Yeah.
awesome. She and I just did a trade of pinups for
So
each other's
rad.
book.
Dude, her Zeppelin
Um,
looks so sick.
it's phenomenal. So good. I love seeing other people's interpretation of the character. But yeah, so it was an incredible time to finally, like, be in the same room with all these people that I'd spent time with. And I think the thing that everybody kept reiterating is, like, we were surprised how, like, what, by everyone's height, like, most of us are about the same height. But
So I was talking
looking
about
forward.
Ben and Eric, Ben Collins and Eric Allred. I always think
Mhm.
Eric is like 6 foot something, and I think, or no, I think Eric's short, and then Ben is like 6 foot something. But it turns out, like, Eric is actually really tall, and Ben is like five, like closer to my height, like in
Mhm.
that 5'6" to 5'9" or so. And I'm like, what? Doesn't make sense to me. Like, height, when you see people in differences, throws you off.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, shout out to Eric Allred and Ben Collins, pals of mine as
Yeah,
well. Um, yeah, looking forward to IC3. I mean, I'm talking to both of those guys about, like, getting up there, since Eric is also located around here.
yeah,
But this time will be a lot more interesting for me, since I will be tabling this time, and I mean, it's already like, clearly a bigger show than it was last
yeah.
year, like, with the new sponsorships and, like, all of that. So I'm just excited. Like, I haven't done a lot of shows outside of Texas as of yet. I think Heroes last year was the first one outside of Texas that I'd done. So just seeing a different kind of crowd, and, like, getting my work to those to that new crowd is exciting. But also, like, there's just so many pals
Hmm.
that I've had for years, and some that are much more new that I know are going to be there. Like R.D. Murphy,
Oh
another
I
cartoonist
can't wait to meet him in
that's, I
person.
believe, is based in Connecticut. Like,
Hmm.
he and I've started to chat over Instagram from time to time.
His
And
Marvel thing, I talk
yeah,
about it all the time. That Marvel thing he did in 2024 was so sick, man. Like, I love that.
I kept playfully, like, harassing him about getting Warlock from New Mutants on there
Oh,
until
sick.
eventually he did.
Nice.
But yeah, so, like, there's lots of other folks that I just didn't meet last time that
We
we're
didn't
there.
meet.
Or
Did we meet last year at IC3? I don't think so.
no, we. I remember seeing you around because since you were filming
Yeah.
so much, and you might have there. You might have taken a photo of me at the drink and draw
Okay.
the night
Yeah. I think I
before.
tagged you in that too. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, we didn't properly meet until
Heroes.
the yeah, and we had talked online from the Instagram live we did with Eric and Ben
That's
for the Outer
right.
Space
Yep. Yeah.
Kickstarter. So it was funny roundabout way
Honestly, yeah. And
connecting.
that's my relationship with so many creators is that like because
Hmm.
even me, I've only really and a lot of people are shocked by this because of like, Apollo's put out like 10 books in the last year and a half. But
Hmm.
like I've literally only been like essentially in the scene for the last year and a half. It's just I got real lucky and I had a really successful book and then I got to meet everybody and I just network a lot. And then this opportunity with CWS and interviewing everybody I could has built up all these relationships. And then you realize like, oh, we have crossed paths many times before. And it just neither one of us were fully aware. And I love that too, because that makes this next year so much more exciting because every
Hmm.
time I see Rick Lopez, like I give him the biggest hug and I'm just so hyped. And we hung out at SPX a few months ago.
Hmm.
And I talked to Eli. Eli and I have a great relationship because we didn't talk for the first few months we knew each other. We just sent each other cat pictures until I was like, so I had like a real question for him. But that's what's
Hmm.
so fun about these cons and conventions is like it's great for us to bring everyone together as friends and as a
Hmm.
community, but we're also like there doing our job, like we're sharing our
Hmm.
work, we're like doing all this. And I think this IC3 is going to be definitely one for the books.
Hmm.
We're talking about planning all this sorts of stuff like a creator collect them all, like a scavenger hunt, utilizing a map that you made,
Hmm.
which is so sick.
Thank you.
And so I can't wait to announce that and show that to more people. But yeah, I mean, even Apollo City, we're working on, combining all the Apollo City people. There's about 9 of us that are going to be at that convention.
Hmm.
So with us and Cosmic Lion, that's 20 people can hit up and get dozens of
Right.
books. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it's over 150 creators
Creators.
this year.
And then
Big
so many
big
of us
time.
smuggle in other people at a table at our stuff.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah. That's the over
yeah,
part. The
yeah.
little asterisk.
Apollo did that. I got a table for Apollo, and now I have like
Mhm.
4 creators at Apollo, and I'm like, hey, well, I mean, it's still the table.
Yeah, that's how myself, Roagashi, and Morgan Heron were able to like be at Heroes.
Yeah,
We were at the Cosmic Lion tables just because at that point there was I was not going to have the funds to pay for a whole table on top of everything else, all the
vibes.
travel and whatnot. So this year, hopefully, will be different. But yeah, it's very useful to have pals
Yes.
sometimes that be like, yeah, I'll share a table with you. It's I think that's something probably I would argue potentially more important um, than just the selling your comics audience, all that kind of stuff. Like that's incredibly important uh, if you want to try to make some kind of living off of comics and everything. But the community side is so special. Like there's
Mhm.
so many folks that I met at Heroes that I'm still in contact with now from all over, and it it can be very lonely being at your drafting table all day, and especially like I have a home studio, so I'm just at home
Yeah,
so
same.
often. But being able to have like somebody to shoot a message to,
Mhm.
and like they're doing the same kind of thing. They're dealing with the same difficulties so often. It's extremely important to have that community, given that it is often such a solitary kind of existence of making comics. So when you get to go to conventions and be around all of them, it can kind of soothe those parts of you that don't get to that you don't get to like experience just at home.
It's like going to a birthday party when you're like in elementary school, and it's just like the funnest, like all your friends are there and it's just like super exciting. And you're just like, I can't look at all your stuff. This is so rad. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. Like, you want to see my room? Like, and you want to show them your table and
Yeah,
everything. Like, yeah, it's super.
totally.
I'm so hyped for it. Anton, thank you so much for this inspired.
Mhm.
I can't believe it's already been a little over an hour now.
Right.
But dude, I'm so hyped to see you guys, and I know we're trying to work out stuff to maybe do like
Mhm.
some small stuff leading into IC3.
Mhm.
And so I'm so excited for this convention. It's going to be the convention of the year. We're going to have
Mhm.
so many cool people together, and you're right. It's not only just for. I'm super hyped to sell Apollo books and get the brand out there, and you get meet all my creators, but like I'm more excited about meeting all the people in Apollo. I'm in
Mhm.
person. Like Eric Allred, I talk to the guy every day. We've never met in person. Alex Batts, who I do everything with in Apollo since we've become a publishing imprint. Me and him have never met in person, and he also does all the
Wild.
editing for all
Yeah.
these CWS episodes. So again, somebody I talk to on a daily, never met in person, and these cons
Mhm.
bring us together, and it's like the only way we would have ever made this happen, in a sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
um it's super great, and I'm so happy to see you again. We're gonna get some
Me
dope
too,
vegan
man.
food. I know exactly where we're gonna go. There's a dope vegan place down the street, so I'm super hyped.
Hell
We'll go
yeah.
get some food. But yeah, Anton, thank you for your time today, man, and we'll talk a
Thank
couple
you.
weeks on Spilled Ink. And everyone, go please check out Spilled Ink with Anton and the Cosmic Lion crew.
Mhm.
If you're watching this late, it's I already know it's gonna be a fun time. So
Oh yeah, certainly.
and for everybody watching, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Look forward to the next couple weeks. We're having nothing but the road to IC3. All these amazing creators who do and don't print with CWS. Actually, we're trying to talk to as many creators and get them on both Spilled Ink and Inspired Ink over the next couple months, so you could really get some exposure and really see some indie creators. Get ready, because we're going to be doing a new launch of the CWS website that should be getting announced any week now. It's almost complete. We're doing the final touches to it. I'm so hyped for that to happen as well. We have some very new, awesome, great specs on like holochrome and spot foil. So if you guys have any questions about those, please reach out. We're super excited for the upgrades we have to this and what we're doing. But and there's so much down the pipeline, including a very big educational project that we're planning with Comix Wellspring right now too. So we have so much heading your guys' way, and announcements on deadlines for IC3 for any creators who need to print and want to get their books on time, or even if you're running a little late on that deadline, we have some options for you. But February 1st, I want to say, if you want to get your book safely in your hands, stress free, I would say put in your order before February 1st. And that way you can have a clear conscience heading to the show. But if you also need help with traveling with your books and need to get them shipped somewhere to make that travel more accessible, reach out to Comix Wellspring, or reach out to me on Instagram, and we could talk some details out, since I'll be driving up there. I'm more than welcome to help any IC3 creator get their books up to the show if shipping and all that becomes an issue for you guys. So that was a lot on the spot. Anton, you are amazing. I can't wait to draw
Well,
with you
thank you.
more, and I can't wait to see you. I could say that all day, and I won't be satisfied. So we'll cut this episode here. Thanks for hanging today, man.
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated, bud.